Jeremy from Jeremy.net. I am a comic book artist, writer, creator, self-publisher, and I share my creative process here with you online. If you'd like to get additional bonus live streams twice a month, access to an online digital archive where you can read my comic books, access to an exclusive Discord server where we share tips, feedback, process, shop talk, and more, you can become a Patreon subscriber for as little as $2 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/Jeremy. That's patreon.com/GERIMI. If you'd like to get a free digital sketchbook, work in progress animated GIFs delivered right to your inbox, blog posts about what I'm reading, watching, what's inspiring me, you can sign up for my free monthly newsletter at newsletter.jeremy.net. And if you would like to purchase physical copies of my comic books, or if you read digitally on Comixology or Kindle, you can head on over to amazon.jeremy.net. You can pick up books like my first graphic novel, Eye of the Gods. It is a psychological thriller about a man cursed with visions he cannot control. You can pick up my most recent project, Morning Star. It tells the story of Lucifer's fall from heaven as a Western. It's an 8-issue series. Volume 1 contains issues 1 through 4. Volume 2 contains issues 5 through 8. Both volumes have extensive back matter, script excerpts, page thumbnails and layouts, character designs, photo reference, and more. Basically show you how I put all of these comics together. There are book flip-throughs of all these books on the homepage of my YouTube channel. There's links for everything I mentioned in the description of the video. So this is going to be our last live stream of the year, because we're heading into the final days of the holiday season. Hang on, let me just double check, because I think, if I'm not wrong, yeah. So next Sunday will be Christmas. I'm not gonna be live streaming on Christmas. But I will live stream on New Year's Day, or at least tentatively I have one scheduled for New Year's Day. If anything changes, then, you guys will hear about it. But hopefully, all will go off without a hitch, and I will see you guys on January 1st. Also, for our Patreon subscribers, this Wednesday is going to be the last art book study group of the year. That's a session where that's one of the Patreon exclusive live streams where we dig into some of the best art books around, try to suck out all the knowledge we can. We're going to be continuing our series on Walt Reed's The Figure. We're getting into, he's went over the basics of the head. Now we're getting into actually drawing features. So for today, what we have on the docket, I believe you guys will remember this lovely lady here, Gorgon Emerging. So all I'm doing now is I'm working on some color studies, because I started coloring the original, the very first one that I just had my value study on, and it just wasn't coming out. So I thought, let me just take a look at a couple of different options, a couple of different color views. So I started with this one actually, and thinking really, I want it to be mostly really dark and gray. I see a subscriber, an international viewer says, I can't read English, but I'm watching. Thank you for watching. I believe it's a Korean viewer. Thank you for stopping by. Let me just make a comment to them, because they can't necessarily understand what I am saying. Thank you for watching. Okay, so I started with this one, but my problem was that it felt like it was a little too dark. So I said, well, let's go to, what if I am intentionally trying to just up the brightness on this? If it had the same color scheme, but just brighter. So I just lightened up the where it was dark, where it was like dark grays, I went to darker greens, going to lighter greens, a little bit of a cool green shadow. And then I had two over here. Now, with these, the idea is that the base color for the bottom one is this warm gray color, kind of a French gray. And then the base color for the cool one is a cool gray. And I'm just trying to do inverted lighting. So I'm doing a warm base color with cool lights, and now I'm inverting that up here and doing a cool base with warm lights, and we'll see how far I'm going to push it. This one is the one that I'm currently working on. So the treatment that I've given all these other versions is eventually the treatment I'm going to give with these two, the red and the blue. So the idea with these is that I'm going to render a bit more of the background and sort of even it out, give it a sense, more of a sense of depth with the warm colors, and then I'm going to use the cool to do the lights. So I'm basically going to treat this one the same way I treated the other two, except the saturation is going to be much higher and the color is going to be much brighter. And this is one of those where instead of trying to imagine it, a lot of times for me, I figure out what I want by just really doing a small version of the painting. So far, my wife likes the bottom left one the most. I'm leaning towards that one too, mainly because I didn't expect that it was going to come out as well as it did. And surprises always sort of those surprises are exciting. But I try to leave my mind open in the sense that I may very well come across something that I find even more exciting or interesting. I need to shift this to a slightly warmer color. And it's funny, one of the guys on the Patreon in the Discord server, we were talking about artwork, and he had posted something not very long ago about doing hue shifting, so that when you're going from light to dark, you're not just going from light to dark, you're also going from warmer to cooler. And that was something that, I was talking with him in the Discord server, and I actually picked that up from Marco Bucci from one of his YouTube videos. He very well, he very clearly explained how, like, he has a whole series on how to be a better painter. And in one of the videos, he gets into some deep dives on color, which color is something that I do need to put a lot of technical work into improving my skills at. I mean, that's the reason why I'm doing all of these thumbnails as opposed to just doing one or two thumbnails. I think if I had a better sense of color, I would probably know going into this what I want color-wise and just make the image and move on. I'm kind of obliterating some of the value that's just below this. Should probably go to a smaller brush so I can leave some room for it. When I say leave some room for it, the it I'm referring to is that ochre color, that's the highlight that I'm painting over. I don't want to lose that highlight completely because I don't know why, but I find it preferable to paint 100% opaque and just choose gradations of color. So instead of like using a brush that's semi-transparent and building up color, I feel like I like to just pick a color, and then when I want to go slightly darker or slightly lighter, I pick a color that's slightly darker, slightly lighter. I'm not even sure why that's interesting to me, because that certainly isn't the way I work when I'm painting with acrylic paints, when I'm using traditional media. I think it's because I want to have a clear sense of what exactly is the color I'm using. Because the color that you get from building up values and working with transparency, that color is only going to be in the spot where you painted it over that specific set of colors with that exact number of strokes. It's not something you can just color pick and say, all right, well, now I'm going to use this color. And that might be a stubborn and foolish way to think of it. So, oh, thank you. Thank you so much for the tip. We've got super chats available, and our international guest put in a nice tip there. Super chat. I don't let me just put that on there. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate that. I don't mention often enough that super chats are active on the channel. Usually, I'll urge people towards subscribing on Patreon, but that is always there, and I am always I am not too proud to take a couple of bucks if someone wants to say thank you for the work I'm sharing. What I find interesting about this piece at the moment is that I'm using pretty much the same approach as I did for the piece below, but the results so far are not anywhere near as striking. And I really kind of thought, perhaps naively, that considering how striking the bottom left image is, I thought that this would give me something that's equally striking in just in a different way. And so far, it's not working out that way. I do like painting where I can see more than one image at the same time. So I can kind of compare what's happening on this one against the other versions. I think that my darker colors probably go too much to brown too quickly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try coming back in and painting some of those secondary values. Instead of jumping to brown, I'm going to jump down to orange, which this orange automatically, without even shifting value in terms of dark and light, just by shifting the hue to a cooler color. Now that does need to be darker. It needs to be darker and a little bit desaturated. Nope, see, that's too much now. So I need to find, I need it to be a greater leap than it currently is, but not as great a leap as I made before. A little bit darker, a little bit cooler. Still darker. I think I've got the right level of coolness. I don't think I want to desaturate it any further. And just by adding a little bit of extra color in there, it gives this thing more vibrancy. And what I'm trying to do is, as it moves from lighter to darker, it moves from saturated to neutral, being gray. But I think the problem I have is I had it move too dark too fast. And part of moving too dark too fast might be the fact that I started from the gray. I started from the dark and moved forward. Instead of moving from highlights to darker colors, I started with the dark and moved to brighter colors. And normally that is my preferred method and it works really well, but it did not seem to pan out this time. Part of me really wants to just say, screw it, and completely paint over the brighter highlights and just redo this, working from this more warm colored base. So I feel like it's kind of difficult to paint these highlights in. You know what? Screw it. I got to come in and just repaint over them because it's not. I realize as I'm doing this, it's getting just wonky. It's not working. Sometimes you do that. You're just painting stuff and you're going one way and you think it's working, and then you're just looking at it. It's like, it's not working. I got to just paint this out. That happens. And I realize that I'm just going to frustrate myself by trying to fix something that's not working. And it's not that it's not working completely. I think that the direction I was going was working, but that approach of trying to paint what is essentially the color that's underneath the highlight, trying to paint it around the highlight is just an exercise in frustration. So why not just correct it and move on? Now, I will still come around the edges of this color and paint a slightly darker, grayer color around the outside of this. But that feels like a less frustrating endeavor. And I'm going to leave some of the places where I painted that bright yellow highlight so I can come back and color pick that once I get this sorted out. But now it does genuinely feel like it's some sort of highlight base, slightly more saturated, slightly warmer. I think it works a lot better. Come back in here with a little bit of gray, the underside of this guy's mouth. I'm just looking around, trying to see if there's any other places that I missed before I go to a darker color, then a lighter color. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of back and forth here. But it makes sense that I should make the base for these highlights more saturated because light is where color lives. In shadow, color is dim. So it makes sense that I need to have it more saturated. So I'm going to go to a cooler, redder color. I'm going to desaturate that a bit and make it darker. And let's see how this looks. I think that could be a little bit more desaturated. Doesn't need to be darker, just more desaturated. Yeah, I think that'll work. Although my very first instinct, as soon as I start putting down a mark, is I'm just doing what I did over again in terms of trying to paint around a highlight. But this time I intentionally painted that light extra broad, knowing that I was going to come in and do this. And also I'm pushing a little bit too hard. I need to use a lighter touch so I get a nice thin line. Or I need to remember that this is just a small study for the actual real painting. And it doesn't matter how hard I push, because it doesn't matter if the colors are mishmashed up, not in the right place. I'm like, it's fine. It's fine. It doesn't matter. I'm starting to like this more. In relationship to the other ones, I mean. The fact that, like, when I look at these, the bottom left and the bottom center, I'd feel completely fine doing either of these as the final painting. I'm just not sure which. The bottom right one is the one that I like the least. And this one, up until now, was working so poorly, it wasn't even in competition for being one that I liked or didn't like. Now it's at least getting to the point where I can see myself considering this being one of the options. And that is all that I want. I just want it to be good enough to be in the ballpark. I mean, if I were to do, I suppose my goal, and this is a conversation I had with my wife and I've had with friends about doing multiple thumbnails, whether color thumbnails or just, you know, pen and ink, working out composition and figures, is that if I am able to produce multiple thumbnails that I have trouble deciding whether they are the best one or not, that means that I'm doing a good enough job with my composition that I can make multiple different colors work. Like if I did these and only one color worked, I'm like, oh, okay, well, I guess that's the piece and I'm going to do it. But if I have like three or four and it's hard to choose between them, to me, that means I've done a better job with my composition by virtue of the fact that it's hard to choose. You know, if you do something that's good enough that it is difficult to decide which version, you've done something well. So I'm going to come back and paint in these golden highlights now, grabbing the color from here. And then when I finish this, I can come back and paint those guys at the top. So this already, just in these first couple of strokes, feels much brighter, much more powerful. Well, I mean, it is. It's more saturated. That's what I did. Is I pumped up the saturation in all of the lights, and it makes the lights feel like light. I mean, I'm sure that there's a way in which you can make it work, but generally speaking, if something's in shadow, it shouldn't be saturated because color, hue, is created by light being reflected back at us from an object. And if something is in shadow, it is reflecting less light back at us. If it's reflecting less light back at us, it should have less color. I mean, I will tell you that that also makes me want to. Anytime that there's a rule, the first thing I want to do is try to break the rule to see what it looks like when I break it. So maybe I will do a piece where I'm intentionally trying to create extremely vibrant shadows just to see what it looks like. Um, I think the exception to that is reflected light, because reflected light is in a shadow area, but it's still a form of light. Um, so reflected light can be vibrant, can be bright in terms of saturation. It can be saturated, but it still I don't think should be as saturated as whatever the primary light is. Let's see, Martin's in the chat. Hey, 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 hey. How you doing? I am doing some color studies. This particular Gorgon emerging. So I've got, this is pretty close to the original piece I had. And as I was coloring it, I just realized it was looking too muddy and too dark. So I said, let me just do a bunch of color studies. So I started by just repainting a smaller version of what the one that I was working on. And I said, well, what would happen if I took that piece and just upped the overall values? So same color scheme, but just a lot brighter. And I got to this piece. Then right now I'm working on the second of two pieces. The first one, I started with a warm gray base and then cool highlights. And now I'm working on one where I'm inverting that with a cool gray base and warm highlights. And then the last one I'm going to do is the same thing, but doing it with very saturated warms and cools. And I think these are going to kind of help give me a sense of what I want to do for the final piece. But I'm already falling into that situation where I like more than one of them. Like the bottom left and middle left are already ones where I'm like, I could very easily just do either one of these as a finished piece. And I might do both of them as finished pieces. But I want to see what surprises it holds for me if I take this farther. And I'll tell you, a problem that I'm having with the piece right now is I upped the saturation and I adjusted the colors a bit, but I'm almost thinking I may have gone too close to yellow too soon, and that all of these highlights that I'm painting might work better if they were more orange than yellow. But I mean, that's the reason for doing thumbnails is to just work all these things out, to experiment, to try different stuff. Like a little while before you got on here, I just painted out the highlights that I'm painting back in because I wasn't happy with the value of the base color underneath. And when I tried painting the base color kind of around the highlights, it just got tedious. And I was just like, you know what? Screw it. Let me just repaint the whole thing. I'll tell you right now, I'm not planning to get. I don't even know if I'll finish this one before the end of this live stream, but I certainly don't think I'm going to get to the other ones. Let's see here. Martin says, you always work things out with the process. I think you should mix the warms and cools. Yeah, I think that's what's going to be interesting when I think what's really going to be interesting is what happens when I move from, because what I'm doing, the two left ones, the top and bottom left, are desaturated versions of the top, middle, and right ones. And I think what's going to be really interesting is what happens when I move this from a desaturated version to a saturated version. It's going to be very pop art. Thank you. So far, I've been very impressed with your painterly style. So I know you're working out. It's interesting to me because I am still clinging to line art. I haven't really, like, you've seen me do a couple of pieces where I got rid of line art. And the thing I found is that I just wasn't completely happy with it. Like, it didn't feel necessarily like my style. But what I'm trying to do is I keep moving back and forth between pieces that are full on painterly and pieces that are like this. What I'm doing now, it is more painterly, but it also feels closer to my traditional style of illustration because of the pardon me, the black line art around the figures. And what I want to do is just keep moving towards doing lighter and lighter line art, less and less line art. As a matter of fact, let's see how this looks if I turn off the line art. Well, if I turn off the line art, then what's funny is without the line art, the one that works the best is the one that I was the most kind of like on. Didn't feel like it was super great. This one on the far right, that one works the best if I turn off the line art. I would say that the middle one, bottom middle, still reads really well without line art. And mind you, when I'm done with all of this, when I'm done with figuring out all of the colors, I still intend to, the line art's not going to be black. I'm going to go in to Procreate and just color the line art. So I'll be able to drop it down in, well, actually raise the values so it's not completely black and add some color to it. So it won't be as bright as the colors of the rest of the painting, but it'll be brighter and it'll feel more painterly. Basically just doing color holds. I'm doing fancy talk for just saying I'm just going to do some color holds on the line art. but that will also help increase the painterly feel of the whole thing. But yeah, I mean, I like the idea of sharing the exploration with you guys because when you see really cool time lapses and beautiful art posted online, it's like it looks like magic. It looks like somebody just pulled that out of the universe, like just out of the ether. And for me, I can't do that. I have to sit down and do a bunch of studies and test things out, paint things out, repaint them, paint them out again. Like even this section that I'm working on right now, I'm looking at this and I'm just imagining what if this is all shifted to orange as opposed to right now with sort of the golden browns. It's got sort of a yellow ochre feel. And I'm wondering what it would look like if it was more of an orange ochre. Because if you shift it to orange, orange not only is a cooler value in terms of the highlights, but it's also just plain darker. Like if I go over here and I grab, now this isn't even a desaturated and muted a muted orange. I just grabbed the orange from the color pick the orange from the piece that's next to it. And if I paint that on top of here, yeah, that orange that's there is brighter. But if I drop this down to like a similar value of that range, it's going to be even darker. Orange, what I'm saying is an orange of the exact same value as this yellow. If I just moved, for instance, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to grab this yellow. And if I move this on the color picker to solidly orange and then come in and paint, you can see this orange is darker. I did not make any shift in value. I didn't move it up and down on the color wheel closer to darker. But just by moving it to orange, it's also darker. So that means that if I want it to be orange and the same value, then I need to, also make it brighter. My point being is that moving it cooler, I would also have to adjust the colors. That's closer to about the same value. And when I say about the same value, there's a little trick. No, it's not a huge trick, but if you just take an empty layer and just fill it, you can fill it with black, you can fill it with white, you can fill it with gray. I'm not sure what happens if you fill it with some of the other colors, but if I just fill this layer with white and then I change it to color, what it does is it just creates a layer where it turns the piece to black and white. You can do it with color, and I think you can do it with saturation as well. Hue does other things, but if you put on saturation or color, it just shows if you have white, black or white in there, or if you have any value that doesn't have a color, it just neutralizes it. But see, this is what I was talking about is if I turn that layer off, so that orange next to the yellow, that little spot there, if I turn this on, that spot practically disappears. That is because I picked an orange that is the same value, the same light and dark, so that, it would, that I'm giving you the comparison of what I would use if I were going to do this. But if you go back one or two steps before, what I was saying is that orange that I just put down there, I had to make that brighter. Because if you just take the yellow that's that color and move around the color wheel like I showed you, in fact, let's do that again so you can kind of see the test. So let's take that ochre yellow, the yellow ochre there, and I just move it around on the color wheel to orange. Now, if I paint this, oh, nope, wrong layer. Let's go down here. If I take this, so this is what happens. This second darker orange is what happens if you just take that yellow and you just move it around on the color wheel. If you just move it around to orange, it gets darker because orange by itself is a darker value. Now, if I show you that black and white again, that layer where it turns it all to black and white, see, now it pops out. You can see that mark. Why? not because of hue, because of value. The value of that color is darker. They're both oranges, but one is a darker orange. And if I wanted to do an orange that's the same value, I would do what I had to do with that light, slightly lighter color, which is go in and move it up on the value scale. So small little point on hue versus value. All right. Let's see here. Martin says, I like revisiting work, making improvements. Me too. Well, because that's how I learned the most. Like when in taking figure drawing classes over the years, I've found no matter what I learn in class, the real breakthroughs happen when I sit down with my work afterwards and just paint over it, revise, change, tweak. Just trying to decide here whether I do want to shift everything to orange. You know what? I think I do. Let's see here. No, that doesn't work. Let's see here. What happens if I shift this just in terms of saturation? Well, I have to make it lighter too because it's a highlight. Let's see here. Yeah, sometimes working out color is just back and forth and fighting little battles. And I will tell you something interesting. Um, I could very easily just have done those first couple of studies, and as soon as I got one that worked, I could have run with it. Like the bottom center or bottom left, I could have said, all right, those both look good to me. I'm done. I'm moving on. And I think if I were working for a client and this wasn't a personal piece, I probably would do that because time is of the essence. Um, but working for myself, I have found that when I think I have the answer, if I push a little bit farther, I can find something really amazing. Sometimes it ends up being a waste of time, but getting to, okay, this works, and then just pushing a little bit further. Like when I'm doing thumbnails, I usually force myself to do 10 thumbnails of a particular piece, whether it's a comic book page, whether it's a standalone illustration. The reason why I push myself to do 10 is because the first five are derivative. The first five are compositions that I've done multiple times. It's the same approach that I've used for solving the same type of pictorial puzzle in the past. And then once I say, all right, I've already done this before, I need to try something different, the next three, so 6, 7, and 8, those get wonky. They get weird. I'm trying to do something different just for the sake of doing something different. But it usually isn't until like the last two that I get to something that, oh, I haven't tried this before. This is a fresh approach. I think this works. Let me try one of these last couple ones. And sometimes, and even if I don't end up using those last couple of ones, the act of pushing usually gives me something that I can tuck in my back pocket for later. So it may give me an idea for something else to do. Like if it's a comic book page, it may say, you know what? I don't want to do this on this page, but this is an idea that I want to use later in the book. And I would not have thought of it if I didn't take the time to work out these compositions now. Or maybe it's something where I decide, let's say I decide like around 6 or 7, one of the weird wonky ones ends up being the one that I'm like, you know what? I like this. This is what I'm going to work with. I move on to a new page, and later on, someplace else, I'm working with kind of a similar compositional problem. And I'm all, wait a minute. What was that thing I did like 5 or 6 pages ago? And just go rifling through my my thumbnails, and I can find that one that I ended up not using, but was actually different. And it ends up being a solution for something that I hadn't anticipated. You can find those solutions later on just by pushing a little bit further. I mean, even with this, the fact that I have 6 pieces, 6 variations, this is me forcing myself not to go through as long of a process as I usually do. Ordinarily, I would have 10 of these up here, and I would do 10 variations. But I've also found, I think through the Gorgon's lover piece, where they're lying on, where they're lying on their side, embraced. In that piece, I think I did something like, I had a grid. It might have had like 12 or 16 pieces on there. And it got to the point where I really was wasting time. I really didn't need to do that many. But for this, I feel like 6 is a good number. Ordinarily, though, I would do 10. That's my usually my default number when I'm trying to really problem solve. Yes. Martin says it's an excellent practice. And I think that I will get to the point where I won't even need to do that many thumbnails, because I can, right now, I don't see all of the colors in my head. Now, when it comes to just drawing with composition, I do tend to kind of have a sense. I've gotten better at working out variations just in terms of like composition, black and white line art, doing different versions. that tends to happen a lot quicker, and I can kind of clearly see where a piece is going and say, all right, I don't need to do this thumbnail. I do need to work out these details. I think as I continue to work with color, I will get better and faster at working through these variations. And then I will get to that point someday where I can just sort of look at it and crank out a bunch of quick comps. Now this feels a little bit, just by cooling it down from that orange, I mean, from that yellow to that orange, it feels like it needs something to mute it just a little bit. Something else that it needs are some bright blue eyes. Come in here and put a brown base on these guys. Come in with that slightly lighter. And then I'm just gonna pick a few spots to dab this bright orange on there. And again, it's not even a particularly bright orange. It's just bright in the context of this piece. Like if I look at this, it's about in the middle of the color wheel. It's not, yeah, it's not high up. It's not super saturated. Now I know better. I absolutely am about to do something that I know better. Logic tells me start working the cools, put more contrast into this piece first. But just to see how it looks, I'm going to come in here and I am going to have sort of a cooler, darker blue. Well, actually, let's go full saturation. I think that needs to be a little bit lighter. And then let's make the actual light. Let's crank that up. Almost kind of like Dune. Sort of a glowing eye. And now coming in here, giving all of these snakes little glowing eyes in the darkness. Hey! 47 is in the chat. with a $5 super chat, no less. Thank you, sir. Greatly, greatly appreciated. Thank you. And thank you for joining us here. Yes, why let logic get it? I am overly logical, and I don't necessarily let myself run with flights of fancy, but it's weird because I am like my buddy Carl Altstetter likes to say that I tend to color with a bag of Skittles. Like everything is super bright. Maybe that's why I've been doing so much of this work out the values and just do the grayscale first and trying to limit my color because my natural instinct, I think, is to overly saturate and overly color things. So I guess I'm really trying to pay a lot more attention to saturation as much as actual hue. But, I mean, we've got hue, we've got value, we've got saturation, all as tools to color pieces. And a lot of times, I'm really just using hue and or value, and I'm realizing how much power there is in just using moderating and modulating saturation. Well, here, I'll let you see the whole sheet because I've got 6 of these going. And I like sort of like the fact that I can start with, because what's weird is I'm actually working counterclockwise from the bottom right. The bottom right is the first one that I did. And then I moved to the middle and to the left, and I'm moving up and around. And that wasn't, there's no plan behind that other than the fact that I had to start somewhere. And I wasn't sure where I was going to start. And the one that I just ended up starting rendering the first was in the bottom right. I don't know why I started there. If I had started with the upper left, then I would be going counterclockwise that way. But I will tell you already, the only one I've been working on in this stream is the upper left one that I just painted all those eyes into, and it looks so much better than what I started with at the beginning of this stream. So, yep, that's a good sign. Any forward progress I consider is a positive. But yeah, it's interesting now that I'm getting to this place where as I keep working these, I feel like I'm getting closer and closer to having a whole set of pieces that I'm genuinely happy with, which creates challenges of its own. Now we will have to see here. So the challenge that I have is that the base color of her skin in between the snakes is pretty similar to the shadow color of the snakes. So I kind of have to decide how I want to play this lighting wise. Because the snakes are orange, but her skin is brown. So I have to figure out how I want her highlights to play up here. Well, first off, I'm going to drop this value, go a little bit darker, just to give her a little bit more sense of form, but giving her a little bit of shadow in her skin. And also trying to create that differentiation between her dark skin versus the gray of actual shadow. And also wondering if I should maybe, this is going to look real weird, but let's see. If I pop in some of this light gray, that's some of the reflected light that I'm using in the snakes in the foreground. This is also one of those things where there's a very delicate balance. Like if I put too much detail, I want to draw the viewer to the eyes. By putting a bunch of detail around the eye, it might actually just become distracting. So it's finding that just right balance of detail that informs the figure versus detail that becomes distracting. And I'm right on that razor's edge in terms of what's going on around the eyes. Yeah, as I look at this, I think that this lighter gray works above the eye, but not below it. And what I find interesting is that at this stage as an artist, I can look at that and say, this works, that doesn't. But in terms of why that works and the other one doesn't, I don't think I can properly, with confidence, tell you this is the light or, color theory reason why that doesn't work. I just look at it, I'm like, doesn't work for me. Which is ironic because I also think if I knew, I probably could also, by the exact same token, say, well, now that I know, I also know how to fix it. So I'm about to try something that may not work. But I've been using completely opaque colors through most of this. And the one place where I broke down was when I was painting this one. I couldn't in my head conceive of what the highlight of the blue light would look like on her head in terms of just picking a color and painting that in. So I just put that on a low opacity and painted it in. So I'm going to try that here with her forehead. Problem being is that I still have that whole issue of wanting to differentiate her forehead, her skin, from the skin of the snakes. Because this may just make it feel like the skin of the snakes. Drop that opacity down even more. Yeah, that doesn't do it for me. Doesn't feel fleshy enough. I need both a value. To be honest, I need it to be not as saturated, and I also need it to shift what I presume would be. I don't think it's going to look good if I go more towards yellow. So I have to decide, do I want to go towards yellow or do I want to go towards orange? It's got to go one or the other. So let's go, or more towards red, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Let's see what happens if we go down to red, desaturate, and go brighter. And then still leave it at a low opacity. Let's see here. Amaris is here. Says I'm late, but I'm here. Was wrapping last minute Christmas gifts. 47 it says I have a stack of greeting cards to fill out. Actually, I'm going to tell you the past couple of years, like last year and now this year, what I did was I actually started doing greeting cards with a website called Shutterfly. They're one of those places where it's a print on demand and then they will mail them for you. And what I think I'm actually going to start doing, this is related to art. I have been meaning for years to send postcards every year, not necessarily a Christmas card or a holiday card, but some sort of to mail thank you artwork to everyone who has bought physical prints or t-shirts or anything from my website, just to take a piece of my artwork, make a postcard out of it, and just mail it to people. And I realized that I can use Shutterfly for that. And I haven't done it, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to send out a card at the start of the new year in January. Just the idea of having a place that will do all the fulfillment for me, and all I have to do is just design the card and upload it, and then I can have it mail. Like I can create a mailing list from my people that have ordered from me, and just ship them cards just to say thank you, thinking of you, hope you have a great new year, that sort of thing. And I thought of that because 47, as you mentioned, having a bunch of cards to send out. We've been doing we use Shutterfly for personal cards for friends and family. And that makes it a lot easier than having to lick all the stamps and look up the address book. We just put it all in Shutterfly once and send it. And it had never occurred to me until this year to use that for personal business. For my art business is what I mean to say. And I think I want to try it just to stay in touch with people. So I think I'm going to have to try what I just did again, but now instead of doing red, move to orange. I'm not to orange, to yellow. Actually, I know exactly what I need to do. What I need to do, and by the way, guys, we're already past an hour. I got so caught up in painting here, I just plumb forgot. But what I am going to do here is I'm going to paint this out. I'm going to paint a new layer with this same highlight, and then I'm going to run through hue saturation, just run through variations until I get one that I think works. So let me paint these out real quick. And oh yeah, I mentioned that we're at the top of the hour. Once I do this little hue saturation experiment, I'm going to wrap it up here. So if anybody has any last minute comments or questions, now is the time to lay them down because we're going to be bringing this stream in for a landing at the end of the year. No, I don't want to do that. I want to do this. All right. Little layer above. That's weird. The color history should have that red color that I had in there, which maybe this is it? That could be it. Nope, that's not it. Maybe when I hit undo, it removed it from the history. All right. Well, let me just do this again. Move it to red. Move the saturation and brightness up. Drop my opacity down. Make sure I'm on a new layer. And let's try this again. You know what? Desaturate and bright. It's got to be a little bit more moving towards a white light. Get that brush size up. Down here. Zoom out a little bit, get a little perspective, as it were. I'm going to move this a little bit brighter. That's not bright enough. Well, actually, you know, it might be perfectly bright, and it's just because I have this on a low opacity. See what happens if I crank it to full opacity. See, that's way too, well, it's not way too bright, but it's too saturated. Bring it back down into like a closer to a normal skin color. Let's go back down a bit in color and opacity and just fill this in a little bit more. Now, from this zoomed out, that might be a little bit too far, but let me zoom in here so you guys can actually get a good sense of this. Now, from here, you know what, let me go back to that. This opacity up a little bit more. All right, from here, now I can just play with, I should probably zoom this out a little bit more so I have room for the sliders. Now I can just sit here and move this along the hue saturation. Let's see. Believe it or not, more orangey does seem to work well with her skin tone. But moving into the greens is no good. The blues look weird. Let's go to this end. Continue on. Now purples I would not have expected. And purples don't this is what's interesting. Purple does not feel logical for this lighting, but it feels like her skin. Maybe if I move it into a purple that's all like the magenta is probably a bit too hot. And then we move it back around as we're coming back around into the reds. We're back where we started. But somewhere in this range is, if I push this a little bit so it's shifting closer to, periwinkle is the only color I can think of, but it's like a purple that's more of a blue purple. And then maybe, let's see what happens if I darken a little bit. Now what happens if I crank up the saturation? It's probably going to look horrible. It doesn't look horrible. And if I desaturate it, it just goes to, that neutral color. I think I may have found what I wanted. $47 says, have you met my friend Roy G. Biv? Well, don't worry. On top of the color wheel that's laying there digitally, I have my traditional color wheel, and this one is actually a CMY primary color wheel. So I specifically got a color wheel so that instead of using a Zorn palette, what I decided was printing uses CMYK, and they were able to get a pretty full range of colors. So I said, well, what would happen if I just had cyan, yellow, and magenta and did all of my painting with just those three colors? And you do get, if anything, I think you get overly saturated colors by painting with that palette. But it's on my list of things to do in terms of traditional painting, which I don't know when I'm going to start on it, because I also plan to make some progress on the writing on Morningstar during this holiday break, not Morningstar, on my next comic book during the holiday break. And hopefully at the start of the new year, I will actually be able to start showing you guys thumbnails and character designs and really start showing you the world building. So this is going to be, you've seen me draw most of Morningstar online, but this is the first time you're going to see me really building a comic book from the ground up, from scratch. But all of that to say, one of my other things I want to start doing is getting back to traditional painting. Oh. I went to my local art supply store and I bought 2 packs of 9x12 wooden panels. So they're uncradled, but I'm going to start doing some paintings just to get back to traditional painting. So I miss it. I don't do it enough. I'm going to get back into it and just start making little small paintings, and I'll start putting them on for sale on the website. So you'll be able to pick them up there. Oh. All right, guys. So on that note, mind you, this is not completely done yet, but this purple here, I think for this particular thumbnail, that purple skin tone really vibrates in a good way. It's like, I look at this and I'm like, I would never have thought that the point of me doing this is that I would never have thought to make these color combinations. And as I'm playing with it now, I'm like, wow, that's interesting. So it's still not done, and I've still got 2 more to do after this. But this is where we're at with me doing color studies. So yeah, all right. On that note, gang, 47 says, "Ooh, the next comic, exciting." Yes, I'm excited about it too. I've been dragging. It's not that I've been dragging my feet, but I'm taking much longer writing this one because I've spent most of my life learning how to draw and how to tell stories visually. And after completing Morningstar, I am proud of it. I think it's the best thing I've done to date. But I have so much more to learn about the craft of writing because I want the writing to be as good as the art. And that's been leading me to do a deep dive into character development. Like, I spent a lot of time working on the story and the plot and the world building. And I realized at the end, if you don't care about the characters, if you don't care about the journey they're going on, it doesn't matter how great the world building is. And so that's been leading me down a very dark, a very deep rabbit hole on character and character development, how to craft a character that feels real to you, that you will care about. You want to follow them to the ends of the earth. Let's see here. Martin says, you just have to pick a winner. Well, what's funny is if I had to pick right now, I can already tell you I would probably pick the bottom left. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to post all of these online and just see which one gets the most likes. And in the past, what I've done is I have set up a poll and I've just posted the one sheet and asked people to vote. I think what I'm going to do instead is no poll. I think I'm just going to post like this one individually, like just post each one by itself and just say work in progress, color comp, and just post all of them and see which one gets the most likes, period. And that will be how I'm going to decide instead of doing a poll. It's just let people click on, and some people may click on them and like all of them, and that may leave, honestly, when I've done this in the past, I can tell you that even when I do a poll, what happens is everyone seems to like my 2 favorites. And it ends up being like, if these 2 are the ones that are my favorite right now, the poll ends up being split pretty much 50-50 between these 2. So it doesn't really help me. That said, what also tends to happen is the last time I did a piece where I did a whole bunch of color comps and posted them, it seemed like the votes were pretty evenly spread, but it'd be like on one platform, everyone may have liked the bright blue one. On another platform, everyone liked the black and green one. On another platform, everyone liked the orange and purple one. And it just was one of those things where on each platform, it looked like there was an overwhelming winner. But if you compare Instagram to DeviantArt to Twitter to Patreon, all the different votes, in fact, the only place I probably will do a vote is actually on Patreon because it's easier. Because with them, I want to show the patrons this is what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. It doesn't make sense to quote unquote spam them with multiple posts, each one with a different image. Whereas on social media, who knows if your images even get shown, against the algorithm. So the whole idea of letting the internet sift through what I'm posting and seeing what overwhelmingly kind of rises to the surface, it feels like I'm letting the algorithm do the work of figuring out which one is the best one. So who knows? Maybe Google and Facebook are actually choosing the piece instead of me choosing it. Maybe they're just choosing which ones to show to people. I don't know. It's just another experiment. Life is full of experiments. I'm past the point of thinking I'm smart enough to know anything. I just try things and see where they lead me. I know what I want, but the road to get there, I'm very open to. All right, guys. On that note, thank you again for joining me. Thank you for the wonderful super chats again, 47ness, as well as our international friend. We had a viewer who I believe was from Korea, who I wasn't able to pronounce the name in the in the description. But I am grateful for their super chat, their contribution as well. All you guys, like I said, this is the last one of the year. So I will see you guys in January. On New Year's Day, I have a live stream scheduled. I don't think I'll cancel it because I don't think I'm going to be necessarily doing anything. But actually, you know what? We might be doing something. So I think I'm going to take down that New Year's Day post that I have scheduled because I just realized I might actually have tentative plans. So that means I'll see you, I guess, the second week of January will be the next live stream. We're gonna have one more live stream for patrons, the art book study group live stream. We're gonna be doing that one on Wednesday. And if you guys want to check that out, you can hop on there, and for as little as $2 a month, you can sign up. And if you want a bunch of live streams you've never seen before to keep you entertained over the holidays while I'm gone, there's a whole archive of art book study groups where we dig into some of the best art books around. And you can get all of that by heading on over to patreon.com/Jeremy. That's patreon.com/GERIMI. You also get access to a digital archive where you can read my comic books online. You get access to our Patreon exclusive Discord server where we share tips, feedback, process, shop talk, and more. We're just sharing work throughout the week. And yeah, all of that for as little as $2 a month. Patreon.com/Jeremy. It's patreon.com/GERIMI. If you would like to get a free digital sketchbook, free work in progress animated gifts delivered right to your inbox, blog posts about what I'm reading, what I'm watching, what's inspiring me creatively, you can sign up for my free monthly newsletter at newsletter.jeremy.net. And if you would like to pick up physical copies of my comic books or free digitally on Comixology, you go to amazon.jeremy.net. You can pick up my first graphic novel, Eye of the Gods. It is a standalone psychological thriller about a man cursed with visions he cannot control. You can pick up my most recent comic book, Morning Star. It tells the story of Lucifer's fall from heaven as a Western. It's an 8-issue series. Volume 1 contains issues 1 through 4. Volume 2 contains the conclusion to the series, issues 5 through 8. Both volumes have extensive back matter, character sketches, page layouts, thumbnails, script excerpts, and more. There's book flip-through videos on the homepage of the YouTube channel, so you can check those out there. All right, everybody. I hope you all have a happy holidays. I hope you're safe, happy, and healthy. Get to spend time with your loved ones. And I will see you guys next year. That's it for now. Go be creative.